Hello, astrologer, and welcome to this session with me, Maggie Rose Cunningham, where we're going to be looking at the energy of the planets moving through the Runic Wheel from the new moon on the 24th of July through until the 22nd of August 2025. I wanted to start by asking you questions. If you're here and you're watching this video, I'm assuming that you have an interest in the runes. A lot of the people that I work with will say that at some point these shapes, this is the elder who thought this is the most ancient of the runic alphabets, they encountered these shapes, and the shapes, the runes, spoke to them. They said, hello, I've been waiting for you, I'm important. I felt it like almost like electricity running through my body. I had no idea what all of these symbols meant, but I felt like I already knew them, like they were actually written inside me. And that started for me a process of seeking, of questioning, of discovering, of looking for, not just for the runes, but for the ways in which I could work with the runes, the ways in which I could apply my seership and my healing skills and my magical skills, and for working in partnership with the runes, which meant that I needed to train in other systems because the knowledge that was there about the runes and how people worked with them has been lost. We are working with a fragmented system, a broken lineage. Now, even if there were individuals who were carrying the torch throughout history from about 1,000 years ago when Christianity rose and when spirituality took a backseat to science, and obviously now that's changing and we're coming back into a balance. But I'd love to know from you, so how did the runes first speak to you? Was it sort of rush, this knowing, this sense of familiarity that called you to them? For some of you, it might be that came and then you maybe bought a book or you bought a rune set and then it sat in a cupboard or on your altar, not quite sure what to do with them, how to work with them. And that brings me to the theme of what we're going to be looking at through the course of this session. Odin's chariot is doing some fun stuff down here with Uruz and Thurisaz. He was speaking very strongly to me about the need for balance between deep familiarity, as he termed it, which is our space of mastery, it's our space of wisdom. Right? It's when we have that sense, not just of knowing, but of being deeply familiar with a place or a community or an organization. It might be the job that you're in, it might be a romantic partnership, that over time you develop a sense of deep familiarity with a space or a place or a astrological system or a divinatory system, magical system, whatever it is, that allows you to then become a master within that space and to exercise your wisdom within that space, which is a beautiful and lovely place to be. And then he said on the other side, we have what he terms committed bravery, which is when we have that sense that I really don't know what I'm doing or where I'm going. I've got an instinct that tells me to go in this direction, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to move into a space of the unfamiliar where I don't feel that I have wisdom, I don't feel that I have yet have mastery in order to seek initiation. And I was thinking about this in our daily lives and thinking about the way in which it feels to me, let me know what you think about this, that it feels to me that in the modern world, there is a tension between these two spaces, the space of the deeply familiar and the space of committed bravery. We start new jobs much more frequently, certainly than our ancestors did, but really in the last few generations. We can move across different jobs. We can move from place to place much more frequently than most of our ancestors did. And if you were somebody who led a nomadic lifestyle or you were an explorer in some way, that was still part of your space. I know who I am. My identity is bound up with being a traveler on the roads. And I developed familiarity about being a traveler. Whereas for us, we're continually being dropped into new lives, new circumstances. Our communities are very fluid. We change homes much more frequently. We're bringing new things into our spaces. New ideas are coming in all of the time. And so this sense of the unfamiliar is very present. And if you think about everything that's happening in the world today. The global stage that we live in is one of deep unfamiliarity, where we don't feel like we have wisdom to offer in those spaces because the problems seem so huge, they seem so enormous. How do I even begin to work within this space? But on the other hand, we can often experience our lives, our day-to-day lives, as being very grinding and monotonous and draining for us. We don't feel that sense of deep ritual in our spaces that nourishes us and supports us. And I believe, and this is from my experience of working within sacred spaces, within magic circles and doing readings, that's where I found my ideal and optimum balance between the space of deep familiarity that comes through sacred ritual and deep relationship with place. And it's not repetition, it's rhythm, finding a sacred rhythm in your life that then allows you to, let's say we cast a circle, we then encounter the unfamiliar, maybe through working with deity or through doing a reading or through inviting energy into our space, communing with our land spirits or our hearth spirits. And so those two forces work beautifully together in combination. They're not in conflict. So I wanted to ask you how that lands with you. What are your feelings about where you have deep familiarity and how that feels to you, and maybe some of those little distinctions that I've drawn out for you between that sense of a sacred space or a ritual space or a space where you feel like, yes, I exercise wisdom within this space, and what we might think about as monotony or repetition or being pushed and forced always to keep on producing and keep on working and to produce the same results every single time. And that space of what I'm referring to as committed bravery. And I think of this as being the difference between them, other forms of bravery and committed bravery might be that in our world, quite often we're sort of pushed into stretching ourselves when we haven't actually intentionally said, I want to do this. We haven't set our sacred space around us to be able to do that. We can end up staying in a space that is deeply familiar and yet really not good for us, because we can have mastery and wisdom within a space and yet it's not totally not aligned with us, because we have no energy to move into the space of committed bravery. We might be being forced to show up brave in our lives every day in ways that aren't in alignment with who we want to be, what we want to do, where we want our energy to go. And so really we're operating from a place of just trying to survive, which isn't the same as saying, I want to go into a space where we learn something else as we begin the path. Like we've got the new moon here. We begin our path and our journey into wisdom, which we'll be doing through the coming month, whatever the wisdom journey is for you in the coming month. And we do so intentionally, and we say, I choose this. So there's an important distinction here around choice versus survival that comes with that sense of committed bravery. So let me know what your thoughts are about that. And we're going to explore the astrological movements through that lens today. I can feel it when I move my hands around the rune circle. I can feel my parasympathetic nervous system kicking in and that sense of calm, but it's not a sort of soporific calm, it's a ready calm and opening to myself coming through when I put my hand around the runes. And then I feel much more able to explore the planetary movements, which is my act of committed bravery to say, okay, the previous month is gone. I might have missed some opportunities. It might not have been the best month in the world. Maybe it was a fabulous month and you don't want to leave behind and you want to keep on experiencing the previous month. This is a process of releasing that and saying, okay, I built my familiarity with that month. Now I'm stepping into a new one. And are we going to be able to do that with committed bravery? So we might think about this process of tracing the planetary movement as an opportunity to step into committed bravery. So I've got two ways that we can start to get an overview of what's happening through the course of this lunar month. So we've got our wheel here. For those on Lunar Star Wheel, you'll find this in your resource area, not with all of the planets drawn out, but with the runic circle. And for those of you who are new to working with me, we start off with Theyu down here. This is the solstice, the summer solstice, winter solstice up here. This is the autumn, Kano, the spring, and the rest of the runes arranged around. And this, the sun, soon as chariot here, he moves through the whole runic wheel through the course of a single year. Other chariots are doing their own thing. They're moving at a different pace. Odin's chariot, the equivalent of Mercury, and Frigg's chariot, the equivalent of Venus, they, broadly speaking, follow the passage of the sun, pretty much going through the whole cycle through the course of a year. But sometimes they're ahead of the sun, sometimes they're behind. A lot of that has to do with retrograde action, which we're going to talk about in relation to Odin's chariot. But you can see how these all move. So when I've got a little dot, that means that a planet is moving. Obviously, they're all moving, but it's moving through a sign into a different rune. So you can see that Odin is only in 2 runes this month, which is very unusual for him, and it's because he's in retreat. Tyr's chariot over here is moving through 3. Suna always moves through 3. She starts off in Uruz this month, and then she moves through 2 further chariots through the course of the cycle. You can see we've got our outlier planets here that we'll look at a little bit more, and they're sticking with their runes because they take much longer to move. And then we've got the moon here. So our moon is a new moon in Uruz. Can you see how strong the Uruz energy is? It's one of my birth runes, and I really, really love working with it. So for me, it feels like a space of deep familiarity. And we've got a new moon in Uruz, Suna's chariot of Uruz. Frigg is going to move into Uruz by the end of this cycle, and Odin is going to go back into Uruz. So he actually starts in Thurisaz, but he's going on retreat, so he's going to go back into Uruz. So the Uruz energy is like a gravitational field drawing the planets in, and then the moon travels through the runic wheel, ending up almost on the opposite side at the point of the full moon, which we have in Algiz, really lovely full moon in Algiz. And then the moon continues, and we end up over here with our next new moon cycle. Absolutely, you can pop your planets onto so that you can see actually how they move, or you can do a little chart like this that I've got down at the bottom here. So you can see here that Suna's chariot, I've just represented that she moves through Uruz, Thurisaz, and Anthuz this month. She's also going to be in Baldur's Hall, which I represent as a little burst of light here. So she's actually going to be in Baldur's Hall for the entire lunar cycle, and we're doing a catch-up day this month, so we've got an extra day to fit in. So on the 22nd, which is the last day of the lunar cycle, then the sun will move into Saga's Hall. So Baldur, this god of the light, who also undertakes a journey of death, you know, is very powerful and present throughout all of this cycle. And if you think about that in terms of familiarity and bravery, being in a space where you feel familiar, being in a space where you feel brave, where you're finding your own edges, Baldur is a representation of the light, of this sense of the familiar, you know, of this sense that his hall is said to be so filled with light that nothing impure can enter it. You know? Oh, lovely space. And then he gets shot and killed, you know, not expected. He thought that he had all the power and the protection in all of the world, which sort of means that if you are totally and utterly safe, you can never move into a space of bravery because there is nothing for you to fear. You know? And I think he counsels that. It doesn't matter how much we defy fate, fate will find a way. You know, we often see this death of Baldur as being a tragedy, but if you think about it from a cyclical model of time, where the planets move round and round and they repeat and they deepen, and just as we do, it's actually essential that every deity, every person, every being has the opportunity to step into bravery. Now, and so this act of the mistletoe being thrown by his brother at the instigation of Loki over here in Bacano at the moment is an act of fate which must happen. And so it is sort of saying to us, brave will come. You might as well intend it. You know, you might as well decide where are the spaces where I need to find my brave and move into it this time. Okay. So noticing, as I did many in Uruz, it's much easier on our cyclical diagram to see how many move into Uruz. You have to look them here. You can see the sun, you can see Odin, and then you can see Frigg down here, and then we've got Tyr moving through Radokinaz and Devo during this period of time. And let's do our outlier planets now, because they're not moving. So the thing to notice with the outlier planets, and I'm including within that Thor, Loki, Ud, Aegir, and Hela, because they're not moving. Really, these last 3 are the ones that affect us on a collective level. But you'll notice that as well as Odin's chariot being in retrograde or on retreat, as I like to call it, we have 3 other planets on retreat. And this means that the controlling forces of Loki and Aegir and Hela are absent at this present time, which can mean that we are left to our own devices a little bit more. It can mean, that sense of Loki coming and saying, right, no one else is going to make sure that Velda dies, so I'm going to do it. He's not doing that. So things can go a little bit awry during these periods of time. Aegir governing the deep seas and the space of dream and innovation, not here. So we might get some really great ideas that sound fabulous and brilliant. Actually work that well. That sense of like inspiration coming can be a little bit off. And with Hela's chariot, that relationship that we have with our ancestral energy is loosening to a certain extent. And what is worth bearing in mind with that is it can mean that there are creative energies available within the land of the living and within the conscious world, or Midgard, as we call it, that are not normally present, but we might have to work a little bit harder and be a little bit more intentional about it because it's not being directed by the patrons of each of the chariots. So if you have a fabulous creative idea, it is your job to tend it and recognize that it will probably slip away if you don't actually do something about it, because these deities aren't here to hold that energy for you. So it's that, again, it's the space of brave and saying, okay, I will hold this during this period of time. Not that these are necessarily always felt negatively. So when Odin and Frigg go on retreat, that can feel a little bit pants, I'm not going to lie, because there's such important conscious sovereign energies helping us to stand in our own sovereignty. But sometimes this is a loosening. So there are opportunities can come up for us during this time, because things aren't being quite so directed in the same way. But we might need to take a lot more responsibility for tending to our relationship with the ancestors and working in the spaces of the dream world and sticking to what we have promised and being intentional in what we're doing and recognizing when we are bound and we need to keep going with what we've committed to, and when we need to cut our bonds and break free. Tends to be what Loki is looking at there. We're not going to go into these energies massively because we've done those in other sessions today. We're going to look now at day by day what's happening with planets. So we're going to move our cycle here for now. We're just going to have a look at through the course of this cycle, how are things going to pan out for us. So we're going to start on the 24th with our new moon in Uruz and Frigg's chariot moving through Algiz. I mentioned the Uruz energy to me feels like the space of the deeply familiar. The Algiz rune to me always speaks of stepping into intentional brave, even though I have Algiz in my birth chart as my Thor's chariot rune, which means that my job is to create processes for people and help them to step through their gateways, their fated gateways. That's what I do. It doesn't mean that I get to be all like, yeah, I'm totally familiar. Every morning I'm waking up and thinking, oh, what's today going to bring? How am I going to be supporting it today? What guidance do I need to follow? So we've got a very strong Uruz energy, but we've still got what I think about at this point as being a little bit of residual Algiz energy. And I say that because most of these planets have passed through Algiz now. Frigg literally is in Athala on the day of the new moon, and then she changes and she shifts into Algiz on that day. So she brings that sense of new opportunity, which is great for the new moon. So if you're able to use the new moon to do some reflection for yourself on where are my spaces of deep familiarity, and are they my spaces, or am I in them because I've been taught to fear stepping into intentional bravery? Maybe I'm really tired, too much is being asked of me, or maybe that's how I've been programmed. The world told me I'm not able to do this and I'm not able to do that. Those beliefs that we have been given of deep familiarity, even if they're not actually ours. And where are your spaces where you're like, absolutely, yes, this is my space. Right, I said about the space of the sacred. To me, that's where I always return. It's my platform from which I move into intentional bravery. So where are your platforms? Where are the spaces where you get to say, yes, I feel in my wisdom and my center here, so that I can then use this Algiz energy that Frigg is gifting to find my next gateway, to find my next place through. In that first week, we also have Tia's chariot moves into Kina, so out of Grado, out of the space of the road, moving forward, the rhythm Simply finding momentum, like movement, into a much more a sense of intentional creativity. So it's the time where you're able to shape with your hand, to create what you want, to take action that isn't moving away from it, not action of the feet, moving away from or towards it, action of the hand. Really what Tyr is offering to us. And then we have on Wednesday the 30th, we have soon as Chariot moves into Uruz, brilliant time for healing during this time, self-healing, absolutely. Being in that space of deep familiarity, absolutely. She's going to move into Thurisaz. Now, when she does this, Odin is in Thurisaz. So down here, you can see starts off the month in Thurisaz. So it's a really powerful Thurisaz time. Some people can get a bit nervous about that. Let's embrace it as a time of intentional bravery. It's the energy of the giant and the thorn, and it can feel chaotic at times and difficult to control. But it is also a rune of power and passion and standing up for what you love and embracing your wildness. If I'm not conventional, it's because I don't like that particular convention. All of that is available to us through the Thurisaz. So it brings a fierceness, but it's blending. And the reason it's blending is because Odin is moving backwards. So he's in Thurisaz, and then at the beginning of the next week, he goes, oh, I'm just going to go back into Uruz. I think I forgot something. So there's this sense of strength that comes with the power and the passion of Thurisaz. Now, when I feel these energies in my body, because I've worked on making the rune the space for me of deep familiarity, I feel this place of Uruz and Thurisaz as a place of profound opportunity for my wild self to step through. I want to be out in nature. I want to be digging in the earth. I want to be drumming. I want to be paying real attention to the food that I'm eating and whether it feels good and saying no to it when it doesn't. This is a time for my body to make its wisdom known to my mind and for me to commune with that wild self. That's the way that I feel that. Some people will feel the combination of these two energies and they will go, oh, that's a space that it feels more edgy to me than is comfortable. So feel into that. How do those two runes, this sense of the aurochs, this amazingly powerful herd animal with its big horns roaming across the plains, and the sense of the Thurisaz, the Jotun, the mountain and rock primal energies that used to walk our lands. Maybe we might say that they're sleeping now or that they don't want to interact unless we've proven ourselves otherwise, but they're there. Does the wilderness feel alien? Or does it feel like, yes, this is also part of me that I want to embrace at the moment? So we have those opportunities coming. Then we have on the 6th, Frigg's Chariot, and there she is down there, Frigg's Chariot moves into phase. So she's now starting a new cycle. So Dargaz is the end of one cycle, steps through the gateway, and she begins a new cycle with the Elder Futhark. Real energy of abundance and generosity. It's a great time to be communing with friends, inviting people over, injecting new energy into your friendships and your family. Very much she governs social bonds at this point. So she, to me, I'm moving back a little bit more into the space of the deep familiar and saying, what do I want my deep familiar to feel like? How can I make my social spaces feel more sacred? Because they are sacred. How do I make them feel more sacred to me? Is the question that I'm going to be asking myself through that period of time. And then we have our full moon in Algiz. And to me, when I feel this again, I can feel my heart opening. I can feel the sense here, two things are coming through for me. So one is the spirit of the swan maiden, also the Valkyrie, but it's the most protective element of the Valkyrie coming through, and also with the rainbow. It's a really bright rainbow, but it's a rainbow that I can feel sort of above. So it's that really strong, powerful, protective energy of Algiz coming through for me during the course of this full moon. And it sort of reminds me that this energy of protection and of guidance, of divine guidance, is an appropriate energy, whether we are in the space of the deeply familiar or in the space of committed and intentional bravery. That our personal Nornir, that the Valkyrie, that the Disir are with us and that they are watching over us. It's a beautiful time to give rituals of thanks during this full moon and to invite our protective spirits in. Okay. Then we're starting to move into the second half of the cycle now. Odin is going to move out of retreat. This is his last day on retreat. Then he'll spend a couple of days looking as if he's not moving at all, and then he'll be going back in forward energy. And you can see here that he pops back into Thurisaz at this point. So he gets 2 bites of the cherry for Uruz and Thurisaz through this year, loving those energies. This is very much about saying, connecting to your primal self. Connecting to your primal self and recommending that the realm of the mind and the intellect is nothing without a deep-rooted anchoring within the spiritual and the physical and the energetic. It can become totally disassociated from what is actually going on in the world when we spend too much time in the realm of the mind. So I think Odin is really helping us with that and helping us to reconnect with that in a very powerful way. And then he comes out of retreat and his guiding energy starts to come back through. It's like he's gone on his own retreat to find what he needed to know, and then he'll bring it back to us just as soon as Chariot moves into his rune, the Ansu's rune, the rune of communication. Right? So although Odin remains in Thurisaz, the fact that Stuna's Chariot is in Ansu, rune of the divine voice, it's a really lovely partnership, and it partners the mind with the heart. For me, the Thurisaz rune is such a powerful symbol of the heart, not the lovey-dovey heart, the deep, passionate, don't mess with the things then the people that I love heart. So they come together. Really, really lovely union. And then Frigg moves into Uruz, so she's bringing that strength of the Uruks. So this second half of the cycle, really, really great time to seek an empowerment and to say, I'm standing in my places of wisdom and I've created my sacred spaces and I've looked at them and I've said, where are they? How do I create more of them? How do I bring the sacred more fully into the other spaces that I'm deeply familiar with, if that feels good and right to you? How do I maybe start to say, I'm ready to let go of that? Just because I know this realm well doesn't mean I want to be in it. And then over here, we're now standing in our power and we're making that committed space for our brave to come through. And then finally, we have our Gibo rune. So Tyr will move into the Gibo rune. So it's a time of committal. I mentioned this whole thing about committed bravery. What are the promises you hold in your heart? Not necessarily even the ones that you've spoken out loud, binding to the promises that we hold in our heart. But it's a time when we can recommit to the promises that are important to us. And as I've said down here, then on that very final day, we'll move out of Baldur's Hall into Saga's Hall. And Saga holds that Adinic energy as well. It's lovely that soon as Chariot moves into Ansu's, and Saga holds that through Ansu's, Rado, and Kinaz. All of them runes of momentum and forging and moving forward. And Odin goes and he visits the Nornir every day. The gods go and they visit the Nornir, but Odin also makes other visits. And one of the visits he makes is he visits Saga and he sits at her long table with her and they talk about what he's seen in the world and they exchange news. And she offers her perspective to what's happening in the world. So she opens our next lunar cycle and coming back to this sense of what this process is for, this process of tuning into the spaces of deep familiarity and of tuning into the spaces of committed bravery. So powerful for Saga. And I think that is what Odin is doing when he goes and visits the Nornir and he visits Saga and he sits on his great throne, which he shared with Frigg, so he's able to call on her wisdom as well, is recognizing that if you are going to enter a space that is not one of your spaces of deep familiarity, the best thing you can do is go and have a chat with someone whose space it is a space of deep familiarity. And we don't have to do this alone. You don't have to know everything. You just need to be able to reach out to other people who do, to help you to undertake whatever the initiation is that the lunar cycle holds. Remember that I go through all of the planetary movements and we have planetary oracles for every movement in Suna's star wheel, as well as the community rune circle, and that we work at a much deeper level with each of the runes to create that deep familiarity through the Awaken program, working with the movement of the sun. Any questions, let me know. Any thoughts, let me know. And if you've enjoyed it, share it.